December 24, 1994, 11:15 a.m. A day meant for celebration and peace had turned into one of the darkest chapters in aviation history. Air France Flight 8969, an Airbus A300, had just taken off from Algiers when the tense silence of the cabin was shattered by the horrifying sound of a lock breaking and screams in Arabic. Four men, armed with Kalashnikovs and grenades strapped to their waists, seized control of the cockpit. This was not a simple hijacking for money or the release of prisoners. It was a sinister plot to bring a nation to its knees. At 30,000 feet, their ultimate aim was not a safe airport, but a catastrophic crash. The target? The Eiffel Tower. Can you imagine the moment passengers realize, amid the terrorist screams and the sound of jet fuel, that their destination is not Paris, but their final flight? In that moment, the fate of 172 people, and possibly millions more, rested in the hands of a group of armed men and a special team about to begin the bravest and deadliest game of their lives. This is the story of a battle that, in mere seconds, changed the fate of modern terrorism within the confines of a narrow metal tube. That flight was supposed to be a routine journey, a regular trip from Algiers to Paris. Passengers, ranging from diplomats to families heading home for Christmas, had no idea that on this sunny morning, their boarding pass was actually a ticket to a metal hell. The hijackers, members of the Armed Islamic Group, GIA, entered with a premeditated plan and disguised as airport staff. They were led by Abderrahmane Amari, a man with cold eyes who feared not death, but failure. The moment they seized the cockpit was marked not by violence, but by a chilling determination. Captain Bernard Tehabou and his co-pilot, pale-faced, complied with the orders. However, within the captain's chest, another battle raged, a silent resistance. He knew that every minute of delay increased their chances of survival. In the passenger cabin, every breath was a challenge. The terrorists created a terrifying order with the butts of their rifles and shouts. They began to separate passengers, French from Algerians, men from women. This segregation was a form of psychological torture. Yet the ultimate goal was still unclear to everyone. They only said, "We want our voice to be heard." The early hours in Algiers turned into a nerve-wracking game between the hijackers and the Algerian government. The Algerian government, known for its no-negotiation policy, did not allow the plane to take off. This delay saved lives, but at a horrific cost. To exert pressure, Amari ordered the execution of an Algerian soldier and had his body thrown in front of the steps. Then came a Vietnamese diplomat, followed by a chef from the French embassy. These brutal executions sent a clear message to France: this is a serious threat. After a day filled with tension and bloodshed, mediated by France, the plane was allowed to refuel and head towards France. However, France knew that allowing the flight to Paris was collective suicide. The terrorists' plan had now become clear: fill the tanks with fuel, fly to the Eiffel Tower, and crash into it. A moving fuel bomb. The plane arrived at Marseille airport. This was the point of no return. In Marseille, not only French officials but also a team of the world's elite counter-terror forces, the GIGN, National Gendarmerie Intervention Group, were preparing. The operation was under the command of Captain Daniel Prieur. At Marseille airport, in a state of absolute silence and stress, the assault plan was being devised. They had only 20 minutes to use the aircraft refueling as a pretext for the attack. The plan was simple, but its execution would be a nightmare in broad daylight, ascending through the rear and front stairs, simultaneous explosions at 2 points, and clearing the entire aircraft in under 3 minutes. They understood that if they failed, 172 lives would be lost, and perhaps the Eiffel Tower would be destroyed. This pressure was not just physical, it was a heavy burden on each team member's shoulders. They looked at each other, knowing this could be their last mission. Hours of negotiation with Amari in Marseille were merely buying time. The terrorists were becoming increasingly tired, nervous, and ruthless. Amari demanded the pilot to direct the plane toward Paris, but Captain Tehabou cleverly provided continuous technical excuses. These small delays were pure gold for GIGN. When Amari, furious at the delay, carried out his last threat and began shooting at the control tower, Prieur issued the command, "Move." The GIGN team, covered by the winter darkness and the sound of the aircraft engines, advanced toward the A300. The operation included 3 assault teams, 2 teams approaching from the front and rear stairs, and 1 backup team for emergencies. The moment the stairs connected to the aircraft's body, there was no turning back. At 5:08 p.m. local time, the sound of a faint explosion from the flashbangs marked the beginning of the battle. GIGN men, dressed in dark camouflage and wearing bulletproof masks, surged through the aircraft doors like lightning. This moment was the most cinematic and terrifying part of the ordeal. Inside the cabin, the world erupted into chaos. The terrorists, who until then had felt secure, were caught off guard. 3 of them immediately began shooting wildly. The gunfire erupted in the confined space of the aircraft cabin. This was not a regular shootout, it was a frenzy of fire and smoke. Shells and bullets struck the aircraft's fuselage, the seats, and every metallic object, creating a hellish cacophony. One of the GIGN members, Thierry Prieur, was hit immediately at the front of the cabin. The bullet struck his vest. However, this team was trained for such moments. They did not retreat but advanced with precision and focus toward the main terrorists in the cockpit and mid-section of the aircraft. The battle in the cockpit was fierce. Amari and his companion attempted to get the plane moving while simultaneously activating grenades. A hand-to-hand struggle ensued in the cramped cockpit, where any wrong move could lead to an explosion. One of the terrorists managed to ignite the fuse of a homemade bomb. Smoke and flames quickly engulfed the cabin. This posed a far greater threat than bullets. GIGN had to fight, evacuate passengers, and control the fire simultaneously. For the passengers, those few minutes felt like a century. They crouched under their seats, stifled screams mixing with the acrid smell of gunpowder and fuel. They had no idea who their heroes were. All they heard were the sounds of gunfire and terrifying shouts. Ultimately, after 20 minutes of intense fighting, the 4 main terrorists were killed by GIGN forces. The sound of the final gunshot that echoed in the cabin marked the end of the nightmare. However, the danger was not yet over. The cabin was filled with smoke, and the fire was spreading. The evacuation operation began. The GIGN forces, themselves injured and exhausted, quickly ushered passengers out through the ramps and emergency doors. These moments represented the pinnacle of human emotion amidst chaos. Seeing the terrified faces of those escaping towards freedom was the ultimate reward for the soldiers. The final outcome of the battle: all 4 hijackers were killed. 172 hostages were saved. 16 passengers and crew members, along with 9 GIGN operatives, were injured in the struggle, but none of the hostages lost their lives during the rescue operation. This was a complete tactical victory. If the operation had lasted just a few more minutes, the fire could have reached the aircraft's fuel tank, turning everything to ashes. The rescue operation of Air France Flight 8969 became a historical document. This operation not only saved 172 lives but also proved that it is possible to stand resolutely against terrorism. This incident drew new guidelines for counter-terrorism operations in aviation worldwide and highlighted the importance of forces like GIGN as the last line of defense for human civilization. Yet behind this victory lies a bitter truth: the cost paid for freedom. 3 passengers lost their lives in Algiers, and 9 special forces were injured. This story reminds us that true heroes are those who step into the unknown during the darkest moments. They risk their lives not for fame but to save the lives of strangers. Now that you have heard this gripping narrative, I want to know, if you were one of the passengers on that flight, what thoughts would cross your mind during those 20 minutes of sheer terror? Did you believe salvation was on the way? The story of this flight must never be forgotten. If you are interested in the depth of events that changed the world, our channel is your home. Please like this video and share it with your friends. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our dark and gripping tales. Let us know what story you want us to tell next.